This video is brought to you by Straightgoods News, Canada's alternative online news source. Visit Straightgoods.ca.
And I think that it's very, very important that we recognize the fact that the governments of Canada have known for a very long time, that we have an aging demographic and that needs to be addressed. So we need a comprehensive strategy and not the kind of fear-mongering that we're hearing from this government. What we have at this point in time is an attack on the poorest seniors in the country. It's time for the government to back down from the wrong-headed moves that they're anticipating. It's undermining the old age security that this government is supposed to protect. As Seniors Critic, I've heard from seniors all across the country. They're outraged, they're insulted, but I think the main point is that they're terrified. They're very frightened about what the future holds. These are seniors with disabilities who cannot work, and they're concerned about how on earth they're ever going to pay bills. We heard from seniors living in rural Canada where unemployment is very, very high, and they wonder how on earth they're ever going to find and compete for the few jobs that are out there. And we've heard from seniors in cities wondering how they can afford to stay in their own homes. I think the salient point is that OAS is money that's not saved. It's money that's spent in the community. It's spent on the daily necessities of life, and people rely on this money to survive. Yes, we need to address the issue of the aging population. Of course we do. But as I said initially, we've seen it coming for years. But we can't do this on the backs of the poorest people in this country, the poorest seniors. We can find savings in all kinds of places by making investments in services such as pharmacare, home care, and we can also find savings in some of the projects that the Conservatives seem to be so bent on, prisons and jet planes. There are all kinds of savings to be had from the $2 billion that the federal government now gives to oil companies. And as my colleague Mr. Julian pointed out just yesterday, that would be enough to provide checks for 308,000 Canadian seniors. So there are indeed choices. This government is refusing to make the right choices. Just in the House, just a few moments before coming out here, we had the ridiculous statements coming from the Human Resources Development Minister when she talked about the fact that the revenues of this government are down and that somehow is the responsibility of seniors. Yes, revenues are down because this government gave corporate tax breaks to the tune of $16 billion a year. And now they're trying to put that on the backs of seniors. She talks about in her speech about the reckless opposition. Well, it was the Prime Minister outside of this country that started this conversation. It was the PMO that leaked the documents that contained the conversation about going from 65 to 67. We've heard academia, we've heard government circles for the last several months talking about going to 70 years. It was one of those trial balloons, you know, they shake it at you, they say you've got to work to 70. Oh, you only have to work to 67. Gee, that's better, isn't it? Little wonder Canadians are confused and upset and angry. Little wonder.
Why are seniors outraged when they're not going to be affected by this? I mean, if there's one thing clear in the government's message about this, you know, we can argue about the confusion elsewhere, but if it's one thing clear is that current seniors over 65 will not be affected.
Yes, and I think that we underestimate the seniors of this country. They've worked very hard and they've built a country that they want to see their children and grandchildren inherit. We had consultation with CARP 2 or 3 days ago, and those seniors said very clearly that this is a social program, it is sacrosanct, and they are not going to allow this government to jeopardize the senior years of future generations. It's a very selfless kind of approach, and I think that we should be applauding those seniors instead of saying, well, it doesn't affect you, because they see very clearly that it does affect those they love, and they're not having it.
I'd like to add to that just for a second, if I may. I received a phone call from a gentleman in my riding, 63 years of age, who said he was sick to his stomach. The way that this was put out there, tossed out there in a foreign country under PMO notes, That's what destabilized the emotions of Canadians. That's what upset Canadians. You question about whether or not it's going to affect someone immediately. It affects those people who are close to retirement. Somebody past 55, 60 years of age are wondering what's going to happen to them. Do I have to work 2 years longer? And there's that sense of being destabilized, that sense of fear that was generated. It needn't be. If this had been approached properly, if it had come to a House in the terms of a motion or to a committee where we had a dialogue on it, instead of dumping it on Canadians like that, little wonder.
Mr. Marston, are you saying that if they brought it to committee, you'd be in favor of the scenario?
I didn't say we'd be in favor, but what I'm saying is we've brought forward a conversation on pensions for over 3 years. This isn't new to us. And we're saying, yes, if you're going to look at it, but do it up front, do it within committee, do it in a place where Canadians can see it in a very stable fashion. Don't generate fear.
Do you think there's any way the Tories in there are going to vote for your motion?
Oh, I'm not concerned with what the Tories do. I'm here as a New Democrat fighting for Canadians. We know that the Tories have got an agenda. We're aware of that. But the reality is there's no need to generate the fear that they've done. That's irresponsible. I want to look at cost for just a moment, because that's the thing that's being raised here. The blip of the baby boomers will cost us 1% of GDP. That's all. I mean, this is not huge. And so when you look at it from those terms, these are people who built the country, invested in our country for generations. It's our responsibility to take care of them. The 1% of GDP. Right now, it's about 2.4% of GDP going to approximately 3.2% of GDP that comes out of general revenues. Okay, so as long as the government funds its revenues properly, which I would say they haven't when they give those corporate tax breaks, they didn't even have jobs attached to them. They've taken $16 billion out of the revenue on one hand, and this modest increase of 1% over the period of time of the life of the baby boomers, and afterwards actuaries are telling us it will go down. So we have to say for our baby boomers that we're prepared to stand by them, take care of them, and ensure that that OAS is there for them.
The government is saying no seniors will be affected. Aren't they pitting seniors against seniors?
Look, it depends on how you define being affected. The seniors that have called my office are upset. They're disturbed. Yes, in their instance, they're not going to have a financial problem, but they've been destabilized by all of this, by the mishandling of this particular situation. So that is part of a problem. They're upset that their Prime Minister made these statements outside of our country. There's a lot of ways. The initial thing financially, no. The ones, and we're taking the government, but people are coming on, they're going to have to work 2 years longer. You take a look at women who happen to be not a part of the workforce, who happen to be on social benefits across the country. They're going to be stuck on social benefits for an extra 2 years, which will give them less money than what they would have gotten had they got GIS and OAS. So that's I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
The provinces.
Sure, this in essence is also a form of downloading, but I'm more concerned at this point, more specifically with the seniors, the lower income seniors. They're the ones that are going to feel this.
So is it true then that if you're going to get the GIS, and if you're not getting the OAS, you can't get the GIS, so the people that should be getting the GIS are out of luck?
Okay. Okay. To get GIS, you have to have OAS. That point's correct. But the total of the two is about $1,140 a month. This is not a king's ransom that people are getting already. And so the reality is for them, that's going to be delayed 2 years. And so most benefits that you get in provinces under social assistance are less than $1,100 and some a month. So there's a direct impact right there. But again, at this stage too, the fear factor, the seniors don't always understand the implications of what they hear here, what they see in the media. There's a kind of a disabling effect that's taken place here that was totally unnecessary.
I wanted to respond to the question about who's calling the offices. And by and large, people who are close to retirement, but people who are in low-income jobs, because they know that CPP is connected to the amount of earnings that they accrue over their lifetime. And they cannot accrue the kinds of earnings that will give them a comfortable retirement. No matter how hard they work, no matter what they do, they cannot accrue the kind of retirement that that their hard work entitles them to. And so they've depended on OAS, and as meager as that is, it's been there. It's been something that they could count on. And in the case of a reduced income, they can count on GIS. And all of that is put in jeopardy by this government, and they're very, very afraid. And I think that if we look back at the record of this government, last June, this government attacked the pensions and the wages of CUPW workers who were locked out by the post office. And they rolled back those wages and those benefits, and they said, too bad about your pensions. This is just another in a long line of attacks on workers' pensions. This is a government that simply doesn't have any concern for the people who've built this country.
Do you ever get in your calls people saying, why don't you start with yourselves and take a hit on your pensions? Like, do they get angry?
Yep, certainly.
I think we have to look at this conversation in the light of, in 1927, J.S. Woodsworth took a look at poverty in our country, and he proposed a system to protect seniors in their retirement years, and that was the old age security. And over time, when it was seen that that wasn't enough, particularly people who couldn't get into CPP, weren't working, primarily women, we added the GIS to it. I mean, yes, we can talk about other pension plans over here, the PRPP or whatever, but we have to focus that OAS is for the poorest of people in our country, to guarantee a foundation for them. And to start playing with that or suggesting you're going to play with that, that is very troubling to seniors. Okay?